Charlie says, always tell your mummy before you watch one of Grimm's videos, because he swears a lot.
Hello, lovelies. Hope you're all doing well. A bit of housekeeping, and then on to comments. The new year has been a bit of a struggle here at that stately Grimm manor. I'm pretty whelmed. That is exactly whelmed. Not overwhelmed yet, but on a bit of a knife edge. Depression's been kicking a lot of people's asses recently, it seems, and no exception. But pushing through and carrying on. Just try not to add to my stress, I suppose. A little while ago, I did reveal that I had been working on a Bushido retro clone. I've shifted focus because I found that Fantasy Games Unlimited still exists, and in fact still sells, presumably print-on-demand copies of the original game. So I've shifted focus. It's a semi-retro clone, but I am taking the opportunity to update and change a lot of the rules. So that will be a thing, and then I'm going to give it a separate semi-horror setting with all the kind of Japanese monsters, ghosts, and so on contained within it. So it's a when I find the time sort of project. So yeah, shifted focus slightly, but still a thing. Are there any games you think deserve a retro clone or a retro update that haven't had one, or that have had a disastrous one, or that you wish had kept being published on a somewhat regular schedule? Let me know. I just got the last of the commissioned art in for the next Gore adventure, written... I think he wanted to use a nom de plume, so written by someone. So that should maybe be out next week. I've still got things hanging over me, which is why I'm whelmed. So doctor's appointment just to check that my circulatory system isn't going to explode again anytime soon. Car servicing, shit like that. Very, very dull, boring, but kind of... if you have anxiety, you know how you get into waiting mode for appointments, and yeah, it's a bit like that. Quick reminder, my review policy is now send me a hard copy, because if I don't have the book sat there glowering at me, I am never going to remember to review it, and I'm never going to feel that pressure to review it. So if you want to send me anything to review, get in contact and we can exchange information, and you can send me hard copy. I am running the translated Japanese RPG Convictor Drive tomorrow, and there's space if anyone wants to join us playing that. It will be streamed over on the Grim Streams channel, and will start around 8 PM UK time, hopefully. Right, on to the comments. Now, there were a lot of comments. I've had a couple of things really blow up in the last couple of weeks, and we'll be here all day if I try to address every comment. Not that I ever do that anyway, but I've had to be a little bit more picky than usual. Like I say, otherwise we'd be here all day. So I made a post, my updated political compass test. Yeah, it's crude, and quite a lot of people don't necessarily like it overly much, but as a sort of broad general indicator, it's not that bad. And had people insisting that I wasn't left-wing, so I felt the need to do it. The results are consistent with every other political test I've ever taken. So Truffle said, last time I took the test in 2020, I was minus 8.63 by minus 4.36, which puts you economically very left, and on the authoritarian libertarian axis, quite libertarian. Truffle goes on to say, honestly, who the hell is still calling you right wing, and can they even humanly begin to explain why? So my latest score was minus 8 on the left-right and minus 7.9 on the libertarian authoritarian axis. I think some people, understandably, given the state of US politics, equate libertarianism with the right, because the right contains the anarcho-capitalists and the economic libertarians, which seems very weird to me, because the left has always been, at least ideologically, the anti-authoritarian, more freedom-focused, more permissive side of politics. So it's weird to see social libertarianism being lumped in with fiscal libertarianism. But maybe that's where the disconnect is, or the belief that people should be free to be assholes. You know, maybe that's what it is. I don't know. J. Scott Garibay, who's the reason why I posted the political compass thing, looked at that and said, "Thank you. I think you're so right-wing, you're not even able to see the frame of left and right." Now, Scott claims to have a political science degree. Far be it from me to disparage the American educational system, but clearly something went wrong. Maybe you want me on your side for some reason, but it seemed that you were being disparaging. But then I've seen your videos supporting Vivek Ramaswamy before he pulled out, who seems to have built his brand on being Trump but worse. So I don't know where you get off calling anyone else right wing. I know people have a hate boner for Scott, but I try to engage with him in good faith, not to argue, just to discuss, same as I try with everybody. So I'd appreciate people not being unnecessarily mean to him in my comments. Thank you. Same as I would for anybody. Until they're an asshole, then it's open season. Right, obviously the main body of comments that we had was on the old white straight grognards. Now, all of this stems from a panel that was going to be held at a convention which I'd never heard of. They've been doing it for 44 years. It seems to be a more sort of general SFNF fandom sort of convention. I don't know, Capricorn, never heard of it. When I went back later to try and find the panel, it didn't seem to be listed anymore. Maybe it was hidden in some nested table or something somewhere. I mean, really, that they've got one panel with such horrendous language and assumption in it doesn't matter, but it is emblematic of a wider issue and a problem with people being demonized, and hypocrisy, and the attempted gentrification of every hobby space, it sometimes seems like. So I did think it was worth addressing, and clearly a lot of people were interested in it, even though it's drama, and I wanted to address it because I find the stuff around it interesting, rather than just pointing and shrieking, as some people do. But yeah, there were a lot of comments on that. Big Slimy Bob says, yes, these people preach inclusiveness while simultaneously condemning people for their race, sexual orientation, and age, and I don't think they can see how absurd that is. Well, Bob, you see, the problem here is twofold, I think, in that what people are slightly erroneously calling postmodernist thought, doesn't see a problem with contradictions, hypocrisy, and so on to this extent, because what's true changes according to viewpoint and context and so on, which is true to an extent, but they take it to an absurd extreme. Also, they have already built in tools within this vague blob of ideology that excuses them for indulging in the things that they claim to be hating and fighting against. So they will tell you that you cannot be racist against white people because they define it in a particular way, that you cannot be, I guess, heterophobic, that you cannot be any of these things because they identify those things as the oppressor class, and therefore anything done against them is justified and okay, and isn't an act of prejudice. So yeah, they make excuses for themselves and fail to see the inconsistency and the problem in that. Jeremy Griffin says, I know you qualified it, but you probably need new labels. Far left, leftist, classical liberal, heck, even libertarian, given the Mises, don't know what that means, mean very different things now. Conservative, by contrast, means nothing now. The Everton window has moved. I don't have a name for all my things anymore. The Everton window doesn't change the terminology. People deliberately muddying the waters changes the terminology. America doesn't have a meaningful left-wing force. People who are decried as far left, like Bernie Sanders, are pretty centrist when you look at European politics and so on. But within the discipline of politics as a humanities thing to study, these labels do still mean things. And that's why, despite being on the left, I generally refer to Roger Scruton's Dictionary of Political Thought. It's people misusing the labels, and maybe it's foolish and stubborn of me to cling to the actual meaning, but here we are. Jay Sorryman says, with all due respect to Daryl Davis, his is only one approach, and if it's working, great. Is it valid? Sure, but there are other methods of combating bigotry. No need to limit yourself to one. Multiple studies have shown that deplatforming works. It limits the reach and influence of extremists, preventing recruitment. Daryl Davis is like chemotherapy. Important, possibly life-saving, but preventative measures are still important as well. And you can even ensure that in many cases chemotherapy isn't needed. I'm all for second chances, had a few myself, but having a potential cure does not invalidate or eliminate the need for protective and preventative measures. Alright. I disagree, but I think it comes down to a difference in aims and goals. Does deplatforming work? Yes-ish, but not really, if you're looking to check the spread and so on, because it makes it difficult for people to present their ideas. No, if you want to starve them of legitimacy, if you want to keep your blade sharp for arguing back against these people, if you want to keep them delegitimized, all of those sorts of things. The trouble with deplatforming and abuses of power to silence people of dissenting and different viewpoints is that you end up just shutting them into information silos where they become more extreme, and your censorship and oppression of their terrible viewpoints makes those viewpoints seem legitimate. With deplatforming, there's also the issue that a lot of innocent people get deplatformed, and that views that are more and more vanilla get deplatformed. This creates a problem because if you've been cancelled over nothing, and then you encounter someone else who has been cancelled, you are much more inclined to take them seriously, to give them the benefit of the doubt, to think that they may have been treated in the same way that you have, and so you end up communicating more with other people who have been deemed persona non grata, and that drags people into that arena. Any funnel into an extremist position is also a funnel out, but if we shut off all those pathways, if we never argue the point with anybody, if we rely on authoritarianism to silence people, you don't get anywhere. So I think these studies that show that deplatforming works are taking a very myopic and non-holistic view of societal health around these things, and the approaches of people like Daryl Davis or people who take on extremists directly, I think that's overall far more effective and worthwhile. Michael Williamson didn't know what a grognard is. He said, what is a grognard? Grognard has several meanings in different spaces. I think it goes back to the wargaming era, and specifically to Napoleonic wargaming as kind of slang for the old guard, because grognard originates as a descriptor of veterans in Napoleon's army, with undercurrents of grumbling veterans who hated everything, and showed little respect to any sort of kind of fresher recruits. In role-playing, it tends to refer to older gamers who are maybe a bit set in their ways, tended to play older games, came up in the mid-70s through to the mid-80s, pretty much, and tends to refer to people who are D&D and older versions of D&D. In board games, it has its own meaning. In other places, it has its own meaning. It's become more of a disparaging term rather than a wry chuckle in more recent years. Lemons says, a risky video. Stepping into politics is the spiritual equivalent of stepping in shit. Good points, though. That being said, the question of too many people in X are confined to one age group, one racial group, and one sexual preference group could be valid were it actually a thing. Maybe I'm missing something, but I've not had any issues with diversity in my RP groups, even when delving into OSR-type games. The only gatekeeping I witnessed had more to do with maturity and behaviour, and was, in my humble opinion, justified. You must be new here. Well, firstly, I don't think spiritual means anything, so yeah, there's that. And secondly, I wouldn't say I'm political in terms of propagandistic, but I do get into these issues and politics on occasion, sometimes more often than others. I don't think a group being largely confined to XYZ, in this case old white straight, I don't think that's necessarily an issue, provided it's a matter of free choice. Games have always been open to anybody who just wanted to sit down and play, anyone who was interested in the game. I think the issue we're having now is that people are going like, oh, that's a nice hobby you've got there, shame if something were to happen to it. There's a sort of threat and cultural vandalism going on, and these accusations of racism, sexism and so on that have no real foundation, or being uninclusive, which also has no real foundation. So I think that's the problem here. But people choose different hobbies, are exposed to different things. We wouldn't expect an exact mirror of the diversity of modern Los Angeles in every game, in every game society, in every club, in every country, right? And mid 70s, when RPGs took off, it was largely amongst the educated university crowd, spreading out from the Midwest of America. So that's the foundation of the hobby. As I've said many times, I've had more problems getting people from minority ethnic communities to play stemming from those communities, not the people at the table. These are white people shit. And so there's a lot of discrimination and a lot of reputational risk to people from racial minorities coming into gaming. It's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. And that may be part of the problem still. If you go around telling everyone that gamers are racist, sexist, homophobes, blah, 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 etc., all these things that they're not, that's hardly going to encourage people to join, is it? And I think gamers as a group have become a lot more paranoid because people want to come in and vandalize shit. So it's somewhat justified. Ravager4561 says, good video, and more importantly, I appreciate the inclusion of the magpie at the end. Glad to find another magpie enjoyer. That was Sophie the magpie. Unfortunately, she died in 2022, but there is a sort of memorial account up, and it's always fun following people who've rescued corvids of various kinds on social media. But yeah, that's my own little homage to Sophie. Caleb Herbert says, I participated in a game or two with some of the woke crowd. Honestly, it was really boring. Nothing happened and everything was tame, and every toon was a self-insert. He means character. It was just lame. They were also really fucking mean. Like, meaner than me, and I'm a certified arsehole. There's lovable arseholes, and then there's sort of backbiting bitchiness, right? I think it's a really kind of steeped in part of guy culture, dude culture, that you bust each other's balls and you insult each other and catch each other out as a way of bonding and creating friendship, right? Nobody means it. It's kind of a shit test. Is this person able to keep up with the bants and give as good as they get? And that's fine. I don't think it's the only way, but a lot of this stuff that seems to go on in this crowd just seems like malicious gossip. If someone comes up and says, "Oi, can I get any of you cunts a drink?" Right? He's not being hot. He's not being mean, right? He's being a lovable asshole. And you don't get that elsewhere amongst these kinds of people. I don't know why. Magnificent Devil says, it isn't a bad reputation that the OSR has. It's a litmus test, which I thought was interesting because you find that in a lot of communities. It's a kind of passive gatekeeping thing. Like 4chan is full of the most horrendous, horrible imagery and language and so on, but for the most part that is like a force field to keep normies out because they're going to be outraged and not want to hang around, right? Which isn't to say that there aren't genuine bigots and so on there, but it's a way in which that community protects itself from gentrification and so on. So it's that's interesting. Seeing the OSR's reputation as a positive is interesting as well. Okay, right. So we actually had someone who subscribes to this point of view, unless they're a troll, come into the comments. Catherine Berger says, gaming has always had too few people who weren't old white heterosexual guys. I vividly remember being in an uncomfortable university role-playing game club whose primary actual membership was at least 10 to 20 years past college age. White-skinned and white hairs and very fat and very male. It's just now that we're more aware of how white heterosexual guys have always used unsubtly coded racism, homophobia and misogyny, usually in the guise of humour, to keep people who weren't already in that group out. Old white guys are the vermin of the hobby. Yeah, that's some problematic language and some problematic assumptions that you've put there. Yeah, it was a game that took off, a hobby that took off amongst white heterosexual guys. So there are going to be certain trends in behavior and so on, like we just talked about, same as you will find in any other guy-dominated space and female-dominated spaces, or whatever else dominated spaces. They're going to have their own subculture, language, unspoken rules and everything else. This isn't bad. It is just a consequence of people's differing tastes and self-selection. This idea that there is coded racism, homophobia and misogyny is that's a you problem. If you keep hearing dog whistles, you're the dog. Ghost of Tanalawn or Tainlawn says, well, Jim, love your content. Here's my 2 pennies worth. From what I can see, the woke skulls work on the premise of oppressed versus oppressor dichotomy. So because the white straight grognards are perceived as an oppressor class, it's okay to be prejudicial towards them. It probably doesn't even cross their minds that they're hypocrites, or they don't care because the other guy is a bad man. In their quest for equity, they ironically created a prejudiced hierarchical system. Yeah, I have pointed out the same things very, very often. The oppressed versus oppressor, that's not relevant to prejudice and racism. And to take one example, racism is a lot more prevalent in the working class and underclass here in the UK than it is amongst the middle class or the wealthy classes. Oh, they'll exploit it, but you're not going to tell me that some unemployed pipe fitter from some shithole in the north, Wigan maybe, is an oppressor, however virulently nasty and racist their views are. They're poor. Their material problems are very, very real. Right? Their votes are not pursued for the most part. It's just absurd to look at the reality of where are the racists and whether they have any real power or not, which they don't. And this is a desperate misapplication of the Marxist theory that this stems from, which was always primarily concerned with material problems, material issues, because the social stuff tends to follow if you fix the material problems. The hypocrisy always bothers me. On the Duty and Honour review / look over, Smitumi says, Jesus fucking Christ, the thing about Russell Crowe getting possessed by Oliver Reed is exactly what happened. That's an actually perfect explanation. I was so glad people liked that joke. Because, Oliver Reed obviously died famously while shooting Gladiator, which also had Russell Crowe on it. And it seems to me that Russell Crowe has been slowly transmuting into Oliver Reed ever since. Bombastic, loud, heavy set, all of those sorts of things. Alright, Kalergi Plan videos. Yeah, I'm so right wing. I spend days and days arguing with racist nutters over conspiracy theories. Kyla B. Young says Germany is Arabic black now. We are ruled by clans. He's very fond of lots of exclamation marks. It is criminal in Germany like never before. I think he means the crime rate was high. Germans have less rights than immigrants. Imperial journalism is doing everything to split the Germans. So I went and looked. Germany is still over 90% white, the overwhelming majority of that local ethnic Germans. Crime in Germany was much higher in 2015 than it is now. There has been a slight uptick, but crime is still a lot lower than the rate it was up until 2015. So, literally none of that is true. And you would think of all nations in the world, Germany would know and understand that this kind of rhetoric and so on is a bad idea. But then you could probably say that about Israel, and, here we are. L. McKinnon says, this guy is a disinformation piece of shit that has no concept of ethnicity or culture based on his comments. Grim Jim, you are a racist piece of anti-European shit. Okay. No disinformation. I think we just amply demonstrated that. Ethnicity is irrelevant. Culture is memes, not genes. If I'm being called racist by far-right white supremacists, I'm probably doing something right, to be honest. Alright, that'll do, pig. That'll do.